Hey guys, it's Dr. Brandie with Pregnancy Pain Sucks. Happy 2026. This last quarter for me was insane. It was an insane amount of change. Even for me, I love change. I'm one of the weirdos that I really love change. Doesn't mean that I make it look pretty or don't struggle through it, but I am not opposed to change. Today and this year, we're going to talk more openly and more honestly about the soft things in pregnancy that really affect women. And I've been doing this 24 years. This is not a hobby. This is not a sector that I had in my practice. This is my life with pregnancy and making it better for women and really studying it and really owning it. And pregnancy is my jam. It's everything that I do, and helping women be seen and helping women have a spotlight and guide them through something that I really struggled privately. I gave you guys a lot of context at the end of the year, which was hard for me to expose. And I tried to be classy about it. There is stuff that's worse than what I posted, but I think that you got a flavor of why this is my life's mission. There's a reason that people are passionate about things. There's reasons that people really hook into things where they can't let it go. And for me, pregnancy is something that I cannot let go. I cannot quit what I'm doing because of the things that I exposed that happened to me. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about a couple concepts with you this month about the deepest concepts that seem like they have nothing to do with pregnancy, but they have everything to do with pregnancy. All I see is pregnant women. And even until I go through situations, do I understand how powerful that is, or what's the meaning, or why does this happen, right? Or what is the struggle in it that I can help another woman? My entire legacy and mission is just helping one woman be more present in herself, either by getting rid of her pain physically or emotionally. I'm not a therapist, but if I can help you be seen in my podcast, in my social media, where you're like, oh man, you had that too, or wow, I'm really struggling with this and I really couldn't put words to it. I think that's the beauty for me with TikTok is you see other people having a human experience and you feel less alone, or you feel less crazy, or you feel less misunderstood. And I want to talk about those things because there's other people that come on here that can talk very superficially about pregnancy. Somebody had commented on one of my posts that I don't have the credentials to talk about something. They didn't check my credentials, but this is not something that I just dabble in. Like, this is something that I research and study and have experienced. But the other part of it is actually going through it, actually being a mom that couldn't pay her mortgage when she was pregnant, or having to make the hard decisions, or, experiencing almost losing my baby and what that feels like, and decisions in terms of how to give birth and the weighing of that. I think I just did 6-7, which is, thank God, going out. But I want to talk about those subjects so that there's a woman out there that feels less alone, or makes an easier experience to help her, guide her through it. I think that Jackie Kelleher from the podcast that I did recently, that is our mission, is sort of putting a hand back and saying to women like, hey, here's a way that you can make it more beautiful this time. This is the way that you can not struggle as much as you did before. So the concept I want to stick to, because I've just shot this like 20 times and at one point broke down in tears, I don't want to do that, is there's multiple concepts and layering that I want to talk about, but they all have the same theme, but they need to be built out in their own podcast. So today what I want to talk to you about is surrender. Surrender for me was such a dirty word. It was such a word of surrendering meant quitting. The first time I really heard the word and really anchored that concept was I was having dinner with one of my favorite people, Marilyn Waller. Marilyn is in her 80s and was talking to me about her rewirement from strategic coach, not her retirement, her rewirement, And she was so excited about surrendering. For her, she had spent the last years of her employment working for them and really being in that culture and owning that culture, as most people who work for Strategic Coach do. And for her to like break of that was a surrendering of that and leaving her house and, deciding whether to drive again. There was so much surrendering that she had to do. And when I had dinner with her, I look back and shudder on my reaction to her now, because I was like, Marilyn, that's a horrible word, surrendering. But I see that concept in practice. I see that concept. I'm living that concept right now, which is why it was so hard to shoot this podcast talking about that, because surrendering was not the way that I was wired. And I think the subset of women that I'm really honing down on are the women that were like myself. There's a lot of different types of women, right? And none of them are wrong. We're just all different. But the ones like me that are wired to be successful, and that's important to them. And I'm not saying that it's right. I was talking to a patient last night about that, where she's high strung, type A, alpha, always into sports, always into business. And now she has prioritized, like I see in practice a lot, where her kids were born and they were her priority. And it's a different shift. It's a different way of being. And she and I were talking about how channeling that chi, or that energy of being that go-getter, accomplish everything, overtake things, play sports, channel that crazy that I had to do after my divorce by playing tennis and smashing things. You need to get that energy out. And I think for us women who get pregnant, having a baby, I wasn't much of a woman. And I say that with all this talk about gender roles. I was a woman, but I didn't resonate with the softer side of being a woman. And for me, I wasn't allowed to do that, because my entire life was groomed to be a powerful woman. My dad really, and I would love to have a more conversation, his big thing my entire life was being an independent woman and not depending on a man, and always having an out, and always having my own stuff, my own identity. And it was actually, parts of it were so healthy. The entire thing was healthy, but I took it to the extreme where I didn't need a man to open a door for me, and I didn't need a man to take care of me, and I didn't need a man for anything, and that concept is really powerful, and we can do all the things. But I think to balance yourself out, just like men need a soft place, if you don't have a soft place, or you don't accept that soft place, it's really hard. And it leads to burnout, and it leads to feeling taken advantage of. There's this martyr thing that was huge with me when I was working with Marilyn. She meets with clients. And it's funny, because I was like, I don't have an ego, because I will subjugate myself. I'll acquiesce because I want peace. Peace is the biggest thing for me. I don't like when people are upset. I don't like arguing. I don't like yelling. But that came to the detriment of me, where I wouldn't quit people. I didn't quit a 26-year marriage when I should have quit it. I filed for divorce 3 months in. And I kept waiting with this toxic positivity that he would be like he was before. And he always would promise me he would, but he couldn't. And I look back now, he couldn't do it, and I tried to force him to do it. And because he somewhat loved me, I think tried, but he could never, you can't be what you're not anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think for me, we were raised, not to say it's an excuse, but not to quit. I was not a quitter. To me, surrendering equated quitting. And when you get pregnant, you change. And I always talk about that, about how beautiful that is. And a lot of people right now are talking about how beautiful, my life has become. I still cry on a weekly basis. The change is still really hard for me because I'm learning new patterns. I'm learning new ways of being. Just yesterday, I'm in a situation right now with something that's very personal to me where I'm having issues with people who expect me to be like I always was. But the problem is I can't. I can't be different. I can't go back to how I was. And just like when I worked with Marilyn had me, first thing she had me do is watch sounds stupid. She had me watch 2 videos with Oprah and Eckhart Tolle with A New Earth. And there was nothing brainwashy about it. There was nothing talking specifically about what I needed to do. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And my brain shifted in a way that I couldn't. And I find this a lot when women get pregnant. And I talk about how beautiful that is when I have a patient I've taken care of since they were a teenager and now they're pregnant. They look different. They're energetically different. It's so freaking beautiful, which is why I named my business Bloom, because they form a bud. And it's just like to watch them change. It's not all glamorous and it's not all beautiful and it's not all, but the process itself is so beautiful to watch them change their priorities, change and go through hard stuff to have this beautiful baby. And it's so, you still get emotional with it, but we don't glamorize that part. You know, we don't, change is hard and it's scary. But the biggest thing I want to talk about today is when that change affects people around you and they still see you as something. They have an identity around you being something. And then you get pregnant and you can't be that anymore. The biggest stress that I see is women like myself that surrendering to something different or surrendering to a new identity or surrendering to being not the same. For me, that would look like leaving work on time where you used to stay till 9 o'clock, being able to power through lunch, being able to push yourself through physical adversity where now you're like, no, I'm pregnant and I can't. Some women that intrinsically is easy, but I'm talking about us that we're stubborn and we don't want to admit that we're different. We don't want to admit that we're hurt. For me, looking back at the last 5 years of my life, when my body shut down, I think the whole thing for me started in 2016 when my kid left for college, which was the sunshine of my household. She was everything. She's just a person that always makes people around her happy. She left. And then my child is autistic and my ex-husband is on the spectrum. So it was just like all the sunshine left the house and it was just different. And I was opening a second office and publishing my book and unexpectedly became the president of my ambulance. And it's just like layer after layer after layer after layer. And I didn't want to admit that I couldn't do it. And it cost me. And it cost me in ways not only instead of having healthy boundaries and feeling responsible for doing all of this stuff and not even getting paid as the president of the ambulance, like just like 30 to 40 hours of just insanity and no one really caring that it did that to my life. It made me grow in such powerful ways and develop friendships that are unbreakable at this point because we've been through hell together. But I didn't have a healthy boundary to be, no, I don't want to do this. No, I'm not doing this. Where finally, and what I'm finding with myself, instead of cleanly breaking it, I tolerate it. And that turned me into a martyr or look at all that I'm doing or look at all this stuff. And I find that if we don't articulate our boundaries, because I felt selfish saying, I need help or I'm overwhelmed or I'm feeling really anxious right now, right? Like actually admitting that you're weak or that you don't want to do something. I think what I'm learning and what I want to talk about today is the surrender of actually seeing who's really in it for you. For me, 2025 and the past couple of years, that was the most painful part, is seeing relationships that you thought were solid, that built your identity, that things were good. I love when things look good. I love when things are in harmony, genuinely, not fakely. I like when everybody's happy. And when people are unhappy with you because you've changed, because you can't be the same, because you're forever changed, and they can't catch up, or they don't give you grace in the messy, you're with the wrong people. I'm going to say that again. If you're with somebody, if your partner isn't gracious with you in this being messy, that you're going to have messy feelings, like I talked about with my ex-husband not letting me cuss, not at him, just in general, in a delivery room for my first delivery, told me that he would walk out of my delivery if I cussed. That should have been a big red flag that I was with the wrong person, or at the very least said, you don't have to be there. And then hired people or asked my mom or asked a friend to support me so that I could fully be myself. And it was terrifying for me because I didn't know what I was going to do during birth. I look back at that now of how incredibly, I want to say a different word, screwed up that was. So situations like that, or if you're with your boss or your coworkers or your manager, and you've always been a great employee, you've always gone above and beyond and done everything to make them happy and communicated, and they start doing shady stuff, or you were traveling for work and you tell them, hey, I can't travel anymore. And they're like, what good are you to me anymore? Or you're not the same. You know, as an employer of 24 years, I can understand saying something to that effect, but to have grace that they're trying their best. And maybe, like I've heard recently, that you have your head up your ass. That might not be the best way to handle a situation, because if you have been a good employee and someone tells you your head is up your ass, that's the last thing that you need to hear when you're going through a really hard time. And it breaks things in you that you really start to question if you're in the right place anymore. If that person, I think leadership and relationships are built on trust, and something like that that's said can break that trust, among other things. When you start hearing stuff that they're talking badly about you, that you're not the same, and that you left early, and they make all these passive aggressive comments, and you are a person that before would acquiesce to it or conform to it to the detriment of yourself or your baby, because you don't want to let them down. I think really being awake and being present and looking at that and being critically thinking that you matter, instead of what I chose, which is self-abandonment, which led to me hurting myself again and again and again, till Dan Sullivan, who's the head of strategic coach, I was laying on the floor taking a meeting, and he's like, when are you going to listen? Like, universe is knocking very loudly. When are you going to listen? So I think my charge to you this year is going to be, as a pregnant woman, all my pregnant women out there, all of you who are struggling right now because your identity is shifting and people around you, you have some people in your life that are not gracious with you. And I'm sorry to come off so hard because it makes me angry now, but I want to be soft with you. If you're in a spot where that's happening, it's not you. And I know you're doing your best, and you really, it's almost like a beautiful test from the universe of it's a litmus test, who is really in it for you. And I'd love to hear stories from you guys about situations where you really felt like you were solid with somebody and they had your back. And when you got pregnant and when you couldn't be the same that you were, they really bared their teeth and showed you who they were. And then you couldn't unsee it. I think what I'm learning now is then to let go. Once, I think Maya Angelou was the one who said, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. That was one of the biggest mistakes that I've made as a woman that was groomed to always smile and give people a chance and understand and to see it their way, how we raise kids, which, no shade to anybody who helped me during my formative years. That's how most of us were, and probably how they were groomed, to ignore signals in your body that things are wrong, or make kids get kissed by their creepy uncles or aunts that they don't want to be touched, or they don't want to. And I've done stuff where I've overstepped people's boundaries as a joke. Like my brother, Nick, shout out to Nick. And he's okay with me calling him Nick, but Nick changed his name to Rick. And I'm like, I'm not calling you Rick, you're Nick. So even I have done things where it's just like very acutely aware of people's boundaries, simple asks, or simple accommodations that you're trying to make when you're pregnant. If somebody won't even accommodate you or listen to you, or you saying and being soft and saying, hey, I really can't do this anymore. I'm scared I'm going to hurt my baby if I do this, or I really need to take a break. I'm exhausted. I'm burnt. I'm crispy. I feel like I'm going to break. I think what I did is ended up becoming a martyr and then breaking painfully, not in a big way, but like I would be frustrated, or I would never yell, but it was not pretty at that point because I was breaking. Instead of advocating for myself and taking a break, I'm having a hard time talking about it, because for me, when I was a kid, and again, no shade to my parents, there were comments like, oh, you would have had this if you could have held on a little bit longer. If you could have behaved a little bit longer. And for me, I would always try to hold out and behave or be good. And for a lot of you, I think a lot of you are hanging on till you deliver and you're pushed up against the wall where you're about to break. You need to time out, or you need to find ways that you can remove yourself from the situation. But I'm telling you, as somebody who's 52, again, I want to say one more time, if somebody, while you're pregnant and vulnerable, or if you're in a vulnerable spot in your life and you've always been there and had it, and somebody shows you that you have no worth, or tells you in no, not a lot of words, that you had no value to them, or shows you what their real intentions are for you, and you don't listen, it's going to create distress in your system. And because you'll feel it. It doesn't feel good. And when you see them again, it doesn't feel good again, because you've seen it and you can't unsee it. So finding ways to protect yourself and protect your baby. And I see this powerfully with women, where after they have the baby and they spend the 6 weeks with their baby, if they're lucky, they're like, no, I'm not going back to that. I'm not tolerating that. They get out of relationships. They end employment. They end friendships. And people are like, wow, they've changed. No, you showed them who they were. You showed them their value while they were in a vulnerable spot, when they couldn't be the same and you couldn't get the same thing out of them. That's what's really happening. It's the pretty way of saying is outgrowing relationships that don't serve you anymore. But in reality, I've had relationships from kindergarten. Some of my best friends are from kindergarten. Some of my best relationships are through the hardest times in my life when I wasn't the same. The difference is surrounding yourself with people who have grace for you, who are in it for you, and who genuinely care for you. So surrendering is not always a bad thing. Letting go is not always a bad thing. This pregnancy will show you so much. And I hope that you've resonated with that. I'd love to hear your story. If you can comment below, I would love to hear it. But this is Dr. Brandie with your first episode for 2026 with Pregnancy Pain Sucks. Take care till our next episode.